King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents The Broadcasters Podcast, a weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the King of Podcasts. Previously on the Broadcasters Podcast, as in last week, I did an episode where I dedicated the whole hour to talk about the issue of celebrities and where they stand now in the common mainstream culture. And again, we've talked about many different things when it comes to parallels of mainstream culture. The viral, trending culture that is where things will come up to the mainstream and cross over, where the potential for crossover can come. And then the mainstream solidified old school culture, which has been around, since media really came into its own, more than a century ago, right? And so we are where we are now. And celebrities, more than ever, are in decline. Last week, my episode was on how influencers have become more important than celebrities. This week, I continue that whole story, but it's time to go ahead and actually go into what people are saying about it, because it's very important. The bottom line is right now, celebrity culture is canceling itself on its own. There's just no doubt about it right now. And that needs to be further looked at. Now, there are some stories that get put out there. If you just do a search for celebrity culture, there are some articles that are out there by the mainstream press that will say it's not going to be the same as it once was. Correct. Celebrity culture, a high-volume perpetuation of celebrities' personal lives on a global scale. We don't care about them anymore. That's the overall sentiment. And so there were several stories, if you look under a Google shift right here for that. And also some things that are bringing up when it comes to the Weeknd's performance. This goes back a few weeks ago about the sick celebrity culture. Or, again, what I'm looking at are a number of college articles that talk about this. That's what's amazing. That is what needs to be understood more than anything else. Because people need to realize what's going on now. It's changing. Now, this has nothing to do with the social, cultural norms that are being brought into place right now. Nothing to do with that. It's just that people just don't care. When you take away the glam, you take away all the nuances, all of the resources, all the things that make up a celebrity to make them much more glamorous and something that is just outside of our normal world. We're now seeing people that are just like us. Reality shows give us a little taste of what a celebrity could be like if it's just an everyday person. But now more than ever, that's changed. And that's where we are now. That's what we're talking about tonight, right here on the program. All about that. No interview tonight. So again, let's go into several stories from several collegiate publications that talk about this. And let me tell you, we're talking about the younger culture. What do they care about? What are they interested in? Well, it's obvious. They're on social media, not so much Facebook, someone on Twitter, but more on Instagram, on TikTok. That's where they are. That's what it comes down to. And they're finding other places to go. So the control over what kind of content the mainstream wants people to go ahead and subject themselves to, they don't care, which is the overall point of the program. We've talked about how the broadcasters, the chance to cast a broad net of content over your entire audience, it's getting to be more and more possible every day. That's what's happening. It's happening in a different way for music, movies, TV, and radio. But again, when the corporate types are not able to control this content, then that's the problem. That's what they have an issue with. And they are playing catch up right now. And as for the celebrities that are able to go ahead and be the people that would be these beautiful people, for the most part, that would get us attached and get us interested in the content that's going on, that they're creating, whether it's good or not, it's starting to die down a lot. The Golden Globes just this past weekend tells you everything. 5.4 million viewers on the late night, the overnight ratings for that event, which if Ricky Gervais was hosting it or someone else back in the day would be 20 million viewers or more. But the Golden Globes now Sure, the pandemic really does change things because people accepting their awards in a gown or in an outfit from home is a different story. Yes. Doesn't look as good. But here we are. When you can't do the pomp and circumstance, what needs to be understood is that media, we knew ultimately was going to take a hit thanks to the pandemic. But there were things that happened during this pandemic that Hollywood, New York, LA, your media capitals of the world, they allowed to happen. They did not prepare because, of course, this corporate, large-scale entity of the people who have control over the puppet strings and what they're allowed to do is changing, and that's what's happening now. So let's go into the story. We're going to go first to University of Alabama and the Crimson White. They have a story from Annabelle Blomley, who writes a story about how COVID-19 is forcing a reckoning within celebrity culture. She prefaces with saying, in what many are touting as the end of celebrity culture as we know it, the coronavirus has turned the public against the influencers and celebrities we once loved. Well, that influencers. Influencers need to be separate, Annabelle. Just saying. So from publicity stunts to hosting huge parties, celebrities may be doing more harm than good during the pandemic. For some of the influencers that might have been a little bit bigger than life because they were able to travel and they were able to do other things, there might have been some that have been, they've been hurt as a result of this, but not necessarily most influencers because they're still online where they work. And this story does kind of document and chronicle some of the downfalls as a result of this, which if you listen to my When I'm Not Podcasting series, I did go into detail during the pandemic back in March, April, and May of last year, and I talked about that. So here's the first one. It was in March, the early beginnings of the pandemic. Gal Gadot and a band of 20 other celebrities filmed themselves badly singing John Legend's Imagine, and the stunt wasn't received well by the public. On Twitter, thousands of people made fun of the video, with one user even editing the video to include the 21 celebrities' net worths while they were singing. That's pretty funny. And what many celebrities, or what many are calling the end of celebrity culture, some celebrities have been receiving criticism for urging social media followers to stay at home and avoid unnecessary travel. One was such was Dua Lipa, the big pop star, and she went ahead and jet set and hosted parties herself. In early January 2021, she flew to the beaches of Mexico with her boyfriend and several other friends, prompting several Twitter users to call her out for both traveling and telling her followers to follow COVID guidelines. Well, listen, you're going to make people follow that route. That's what you get. Vanessa Hudgens brushed off the danger of the pandemic by saying, quote, unquote, people are going to die. And Madonna called the coronavirus the great equalizer as she reflected in a bathtub full of rose petals. These are the things when they're doing stuff at home, when they're not being managed and handled like they normally would, they're going to do some stupid things, and that's what they did. Now, in the story, let's move along here. She talks about the Kardashians. That about the Kardashians and the Jenners have built a social media empire of over 500 million followers combined. And Kim Kardashian West's 40th birthday party this past October, she had an intimate family gathering on a private island. Everyone was required to get a COVID-19 test prior. That's why nobody wore masks during the vacation, even though the staff at the island's resort was expected to. There were hundreds of tweets making fun of the Kardashians and the Jenners' getaway photos, saying that some pointed out that she's incapable of being humble, calling her tone deaf, and comparing her to Marie Antoinette. Oh, boy. Perception and reality. So this writer actually goes and talks to a journalism professor at the University of Alabama, Dr. Chandra Clark, and said that celebrities and influencers on social media are constantly trying to keep up with their audience. Quote, some of them just do not think they're like the average person just because they have been living a life of luxury with a lot of privilege. The lifestyle that they've become accustomed to is something that makes it hard for them to adjust how we think we see them. Just they view things differently, how the world works. Well, they've been, manipulated and deprogrammed by their handlers. And who knows what kind of stuff they got into to make that deal with the devil to go and be a part of Hollywood. Because you do have to do certain things. It's not like it was at one point where you could still kind of hold a little bit of your soul while selling yourself out to Hollywood. There is something to be said about that. That some people were able to still do that. Now, For influencers, in the same vein, but this is some people that are just stupid influencers. They just don't realize what they're doing. Their job is to entertain people through social media, are struggling to balance their over-the-top branding with social distancing rules. Well, that's, again, only a handful, but many have learned to adapt and circumvent. So Bryce Hall, a famous TikTok star, threw a party so massive that the city in Los Angeles cut the building's power off. And Professor Clark says it's the job of influencers to provide content to their audience. Many of them are unaware of what their audience actually wants, so they focus on what their audience wanted before the pandemic started. She said, I think they look at the strategy. They look at the clicks, they look at the likes, and they know that it's working. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon because they've already built an audience and a following. And then she brings up negative role models. Another YouTuber is Jake Paul, who's the brother of Logan Paul, right? He got himself to the hot water when he said the coronavirus was a hoax and threw a large party at his California mansion. Many are worried that these influencers are pushing the narrative, particularly to their fan bases of relatively young kids and teenagers. But again, these are isolated issues. This is not the bulk of everybody else, because honestly, there are always new influencers that will come right back in, because they're only 15 minutes worth, right? As we always heard. So that's what's happening. There's always a switch around, a turnover in influencers in that case. So I get where she's coming from in the story and how she brought it up, but it doesn't work so much here. Pushing a narrative, she talks about. Kids aren't the only ones being influenced by celebrities on social media. Adults can also feel drawn to the over-the-top style celebrities, again pushing the narrative that the coronavirus isn't as big of a deal as it actually is. She finishes off saying whether or not the coronavirus will put celebrities back in their place is still unknown. Many media sites are calling to the end of the influencer, but only time will tell. No, that's not going to happen. And whoever put that out there, it's not the case. Influencer marketing is definitely something that is now taken over and has succumbed to everything else. So she quoted a story from bettermarketing.pub that put that story out. And there was a change of the influencers. They adapted and evolved is what they did. That's what they absolutely did. Plus, trust me, there are other influencers out there that are micro-influencers and there are macro-influencers, and you can see the difference. And there's just not some that are going to just hold on to the audience they always have. But remember, they're always able to keep out content. They can keep doing content as they want and just find a different way to do something else. That's what's happening now. Another story from another collegiate publication. This is from Vassar University. I wanted to get a little bit of, a little variety over here. So Vassar and the Miscellany News. Another story from Karina Burnett, who writes, Celebrity culture during the pandemic reveals the excesses of American reverence. In what seems to be a constant struggle between our devotion and vitriol for public figures, public outrage operates more as an outlet in our frustration than a genuine attempt at correcting behavior. And celebrities never fail to provide reasons for this release. So again, we're hearing the ongoing narrative is the fact that there's a lot of ignorance and stubbornness and stupidity on behalf of the celebrities. And, when they're not being handled and not watching out for what they do, because they're basically kind of kids. They're kind of adolescent in their own minds because they haven't had to do anything else. They've been looked after and primmed and propered, and they don't have to go and, they don't have to do normal things like everyday adults. All of us have to make a living. They might have done that at one point, but they're so removed from whatever the real world is like, they don't know. They're in a bubble. And now that bubble's been burst, and some of them are just saying, what happens next? What are we going to do now? The dubious answer that comes to mind is cancel culture. Leaving a confused mess of pointless discourse, turning the original issue with an individual into a collective problem to be hashed into oblivion. Now, it's happening a lot. Just this week, Dr. Seuss books, whatever, some of them got canceled. Taylor Swift got pissed off at a show called Ginny in Georgia, which I was going to do a video about on when I'm not podcasting. I just chose not to. Everybody else was talking about it. I'm just going to say that with Taylor Swift, there are battles she's had to pick for herself. When she was assaulted sexually by the Denver radio DJ, absolutely supported her on that effort, that she got her just desserts and she won the lawsuit, and that should have never, ever happened to her. The deal with Scooter Braun and her former record label to be able to go and record her music now and be able to go do songs like Love Story and start recording her music over to make money off of it because she doesn't have the right to those recordings or to the music altogether. She's not making money off the royalties from it. Absolutely understand that there. So again, there are fights she absolutely should have, and I of course I support her. Listen, she's a great musician. She's a great artist. Okay, she's extremely talented, but she is, as she's getting older, and I don't say this as a knock, she's got to have a thicker skin. There's just something where your past, everybody has a past that we're not happy about. We have a little bit of shame. We have a little bit of regret. And the fact of the matter is that with Taylor Swift getting older, she doesn't want to be looked at for her past. She doesn't want to be looked at to the fact that she went ahead and dated quite a few people publicly, which was part of publicity, right? At the time, that made her look like a little bit of a whore. And that's just the perception. Now, does that say that she is? No. But for her to go and air out her grievances on Twitter, it just didn't do well. Doesn't look good. And, that's what happens to some women when they start not falling in favor because, there was a time where celebrities needed to have a bit of a thick skin and realize there's going to be some jokes that are going to be said that might be a little bit insensitive, but you got to be able to have a little bit of a point and say, you know what, got to be able to laugh at yourself. It's like, oh, okay, haha, yeah, that kind of stuff happened. But she took it personal. I got it. And, it's not fun to be called back out on some of your, what could have been considered, could have second-guessed some of the decisions that you made. Or what your people might have made you do, right? Because maybe we didn't have to go and have John Mayer out there up in front and learning about the relationship with him or with, picketing. Okay, it's just that those kind of things happened. And, I bet you Selena Gomez didn't feel good when she was, dating Justin Bieber or other people and feeling the same way. Or Camila Cabello might have been the same way. There's other artists that, again, we see the relationships and this is good for celebrity gossip, things like that. That's what happens. We can name names that have done this before, okay? Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor. When their youth and their beauty go away, they could be ridiculed and they could be brought down from the pedestal that was put upon them beforehand, could be brought back down. And Taylor Swift might start feeling some of the effects of that right now. Now, she's still a very young woman anyway, but she's not as young as she once was. And again, you're talking about somebody that's been in the public eye since 2009, right? Actually, 2008. That's right. And so with that said, she's 31 years old. And there's going to be a point where you might feel like you don't want to hear, being perceived as with your past, but that's what Elizabeth Taylor was. Oh my God, she was roiled for all the stuff that she did, for all the different husbands that she had. Zsa Zsa Gabor, same way, right? And Marilyn Monroe, the same way. It's the top of celebrity. So prone to ridicule and so prone to criticism. It's not fun, it's not good, but everybody gets criticism. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets some kind of shame. And you're not going to protect everybody all the time. And so, I can appreciate her giving that. Maybe a little bit of snarkiness or a little bit of a sarcasm coming back to handle it, to show that she wasn't being completely affected by it, but she took it to heart and she went and she meowed back on Twitter. She got Karen, like, she put out the cat claws and she got pissed. She could have second guessed, maybe kind of like put that up as a draft and kind of hold on to it. Do I want to put this out on Twitter right now? Maybe I can hold itself back. Maybe not feel so pissed off. But you know what? The pressure from her agency, other publicity people, you know what? You need to make a comment about this. You need to stand up for yourself as a woman, empowered. You sure? Maybe that's just one of the other things. It's just going to be just a random reflex that she just felt like she needed to go and say something. Well, that could be well too. But again, people are going to be affected certain ways by criticism all the time. And, nobody has a thick skin anymore and doesn't realize, the best way you can handle it is to try to go and just, let it just slide off of you. and don't let it affect. It's not perfect, but what else can you do in your celebrity? I mean, you have so much support and so much love and so much admiration around you, Taylor, right? What are you going to do about it? Again, you have your fan base, obviously, that swarmed, like hornets in a nest, and they were in defense of you all over. The Swifties were all over the place. Got it. But is this a battle to have? I mean, again, then the attacks were done on the producers, the directors, the talent that did this particular show on Netflix. Was that warranted? I mean, did the talent, the actors, did they deserve that? But again, it's like, she felt like she needed to go ahead and vindicate being attacked like she was by having a line dropped about her that you date more than Taylor Swift, or those kind of things. It's like, the script writing was accurate from what we see. That's why people might go ahead and get a chuckle out of it. Sure, it's at the expense of you, Taylor, but, hey, it sucks that it happened to you. Okay, I give you that. But, to go ahead and go full on attack, was it going to be the answer? It might have just made things worse. And either which way, you have so much support around you that it shouldn't matter. I mean, it's just one of those things where people are going to hate. We all know that. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, you can only imagine some of the other celebrities that are out there, if they had to go ahead and take the amount of hate and just decide, I'm just going to fall into a hole and just stay in the fetal position. Imagine if Eminem were getting that kind of commentary, okay? Or how about Kanye West in the same vein? These two, imagine if they went ahead and had to go and fight back and bitch about everything. Again, it could just be in the music that you do in your craft, and you just kind of just vent and recircumvent all those feelings and emotions, the anger, put it towards a song. Like, that's what you're good at. You're good at performing. You're good at putting and composing music and songwriting and, putting great songs together. And, to channel and harness that energy that comes from that. If there's a way to creatively use that, that's an important lesson to go and give to all of you content creators out there that listen to the show. Those that decide to listen to the show. And some of you that might catch this show down the line, whatever that might be. Back to the story from Vassar University and the miscellaneous news. So, the cancel culture and the method of cancellation has had some effects that have been for good. Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby are in particular. Then you have J.K. Rowling's infamous transphobic statements over one case study. But again, we always see that, again, if you decide to go and attack, Taylor Swift attacking Ginny in Georgia, that just got more attention on Ginny in Georgia. I didn't even pay attention to the show until she just brought it up. Okay? I mean, Taylor Swift has to understand the power of her voice. Okay? One of the things that caught me up on the Olivia Rodrigo song Driver's License is that Taylor Swift was talking about it and was praising it. When I heard that, I was like, oh, this song must be pretty good. And there we go. 7 weeks at number 1, going on to number 8 from all predictions. So as a result, J.K. Rowling's infamous transphobic statements, after the cancel culture came after her book sales actually skyrocketed in England. Louis C.K., after all his issues with masturbating in front of other people, he returned to stand up and started selling out shows after multiple women accused him of sexual assault. Despite this process's ineffectiveness, it's hard to resist. It speaks to our desire to have our control of the public sphere, but not much else, as the important social issues raised in these debates are usually overshadowed by personal attacks and unconscious recapitulation, of what she's saying is insidious police culture. So many people would acknowledge that cancel culture is fundamentally a toxic way to hold others accountable. But again, this is much more of a thing about cancel culture, which, that is not helping much at all either. But again, there are some mistakes that are being made. So these stories, where they're coming from, here's where she's getting down to the point. Considering most Americans' reverential perception and treatment of famous people, it's no wonder that celebrities have a skewed view of their own importance. The attempt to deplatform celebrities through cancel culture is simply an effort to retain public control over the narrative. a struggle to display some kind of democracy in celebrity culture. While celebrity culture requires a dialogue between the performer and the public, it becomes all the more complicated considering the unquestionably universal experience of COVID-19. There really isn't any room for constructive discussions. Celebrities' irresponsible behavior in the pandemic and our inability to properly challenge them beyond online shaming calls for both their egos and our reverential culture into question. I absolutely agree with that. There should be no reference anymore to the celebrities that we have. Not as much as we were. Not to the level of stardom that we have now. Appreciate what they've done in terms of their works, in terms of their talent. Right? But to go ahead and go gaga over certain people out here just for what they are and all the things that they do, it's not like you're getting a lot of allies, performative allies as a result from celebrities that are also being told what to do and how they're supposed to act and how they're supposed to go ahead and present themselves. But again, that's on a public stage. And that's when it's planned and, they're probably getting paid for it. But when it comes down to this, when it's online and it's over social media, and certain celebrities are out there trying to go ahead and keep themselves relevant, they're going to make mistakes. But they've made so many mistakes that it hurts the overall celebrity culture in general. And the paparazzi might keep doing what they're going to do, but does it matter anymore? Like, really? And the other thing, too, is that, again, without movies to go see of some of these stars, or to go ahead and, catch a musician live in concert at a big event on tour, or television actors, people from Netflix or whatnot, they might be out and about. Those kind of days are over. Like, it's just not as important anymore. And that's what we're getting down to. It's a big change. To the point that I also feel like, okay, for instance, when you try to watch some of these celebrity shows that are on in access time, 7, 8 o'clock at night on the, the local channels, the Access Hollywoods, the Entertainment Tonight, they feel so antiquated and old, and watching everybody on Zoom calls just looks bad. But that's where we are now. And you can see the change in the celebrity news that's being put out there and how it's just doing much different. And then you got to look at the fact of when you look at what's going on now and the level of celebrities that we have now. Like TMZ, I'm looking at right now today as I record, and the celebrity stuff that they have, it's getting so bad now. Like here, let me just give you some of the stories that are put up right now on the main page as we're looking at as we speak. So there was a woman that was shot in an armed robbery at a celebrity hotspot. Nothing about the celebrities themselves. And then you have a star from the TV show Moonshiners, a reality star that's brought up, that died. And then you have a star from the movie Step Up, which is like, how many years ago? I mean, that movie's been a long time ago. Oh, the Step Up TV series that's brought up here. But again, like not major stars we're talking about. Then Governor Andrew Cuomo and his issues with, what's going on now in the nursing home controversy. That's a TMZ story. That's a celebrity story? Governor Andrew Cuomo is now a celebrity, and TMZ's reporting on him, right? Then the Bachelor stuff with Chris Harrison. There's the whole story about him and the some comments there. I guess it was, he was offending Rachel Lindsay, was a contestant on The Bachelor, and I guess it offended the whole black community, according to the story. And then, again, there's just not much else. Like, that's really bad. Celebrities just don't matter. Not as much as they did anymore. That's where we are. And this is where we got to. Now, here's what I wanted to talk about as well. Because in the same point, I gave you just two stories from collegiate newspaper, from collegiate publications. Now let's go after somebody that is an absolutely, he's a solid reporter. Mitch Albom from the Detroit Free Press. Of course, we know him for many things from his work in sports reporting and writing some really big New York Times best-selling books. Well, he put out a story last week that it talked about a COVID-19 casualty that's not so bad. Celebrity obsession. Very interesting story. So here's what he got. And I think he hit this on the head. So Mitch Albom says, last week, the most powerful celebrity couple in the world announced they were divorcing. Kanye and Kim. For once, America didn't quiver. And then Kim Yee split And the announcement of that was glossed over for news because of the Texas snowstorm, Governor Andrew Cuomo's hot water situation in New York, and the Mars landing. Those stories got bigger than Kimye, right? And here's what he says. The celebrity business has gone cold in this country. It's taken a massive hit from COVID-19. And no one should feel sorry about that. On the contrary, you could argue it's one of the good things to emerge from the year of coronavirus. Think about it. When was the last time you heard or cared about a movie star dating another movie star, or marrying one, or cheating on one? When was the last time some crazy promotional stunt had the whole country talking about a rapper or an actor? Gossip feels as stupid as it is, and the lack of new movie buzz, celebrity appearances, concert tours, or Coachella-like festivals have robbed spotlight grabbers of their relevance, and therefore of their dominance. Talk about tables turning. And then he goes along and talks about, after all, with everybody locked in, nothing to do but watch TV or be online. Wasn't that a perfect scenario for the entertainment class to hog the stage? Didn't movie stars grow larger than life during World War II? That was then. In this war, the entertainers were locked down as well. Who really wanted to watch a late-night host like Jimmy Fallon fawn over an actor through a Zoom screen? It was dull and often cringeworthy. It didn't seem to matter because it didn't. On top of that, celebrities made a string of tone-deaf moves in early months of COVID-19. The other ones I forgot to mention. Gwyneth Paltrow hawking expensive skirts and sex toys while millions lost their jobs. Ellen DeGeneres comparing quarantine in a multi-million-dollar home to jail. And Arnold Schwarzenegger posting warnings from his hot tub. And then we just mentioned the Imagine collage. Then you had David Geffen posting a beauty shot of a $600 million yacht and wrote, "Isolated in the Grenadines, avoiding the virus. I'm hoping everybody's staying safe." Again, it's all this. Virus is the new star, he says. We did just fine without stars on couches hawking their films or breathless headlines about weekend box office figures. Nobody missed the bad boy behavior of rock bands on the road. We actually didn't need Instagram posts from parties that influencers were paid to attend. When everyone is tucked in fear, trying to avoid an enemy outside the door, fame for fame's sake seems awfully trivial. The message of we're all in this together doesn't work as an audience builder. All it does is remind people, hey, that guy's no better than me, or that woman doesn't deserve special medical treatment. If anything, the virus has leveled the reverence between regular folks and the celebrity class. It's one thing to pay to see a good-looking person on a silver screen. It's another to let that person get ahead of you for a vaccine. You could argue America is better off for having sidelined its obsession with the rich and famous. Not that it's gone completely. The brush-ups of The Bachelor and the Britney Spears documentary prove that. Once COVID-19's controlled, movies and concerts, sporting events, and all other attendant glitter returns, it's likely gushing fans will race back as well. The old expression goes, he says, if a tree falls in the woods, but no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? The same thing holds for celebrity during a pandemic. If the audience is preoccupied with saving their house, their job, their lives, who's hooking or splitting up, does it make or deserve a peep? Mitch Albom. Wow, that is pretty solid. I gotta admit. Very well said in that story. And that's what it comes down to. That's where we are with celebrity culture and the issues that come from it. There's so much more to talk about this. Let's go ahead and move along. I just can't believe how much I can go and bring up on this. Another one that's got up from Newsweek. They talked about this and really got everybody go up and at it. Story was titled, "A New Eat the Rich Plan Asks You to Unfollow Your Favorite Celebrities and Corporations." Now, here's what we have on this. There's a new TikTok trend, which I don't know how big it's gotten because I never really saw it on TikTok myself. It was aimed to take a hit to celebrity profits by lowering their follower counts on social media. TikTok user Gina Bologna asked her followers to unfollow some Hollywood and corporate names to lessen the elite's giant incomes. The video was posted like 2 weeks ago because this story came out. What was it? Story came out February 3rd. So this is a little more than a month ago. But again, this is the kind of things that were trying to be done to hit the celebrities while they were down, and the corporations that run and control these celebrities as well. So at the time of publishing, over 54,000 people liked the video. Nearly 1,000 users made their own videos that showed them unfollowing celebrities such as Kylie Jenner on social media. Eat the rich isn't a new concept or phrase. It questions why celebrities, influencers, and huge corporation CEOs hold so much of America's wealth. And then she outlined a new plan to reduce the 1% funding. Quote, I know about the stocks. I know the rich are freaking out. I know that us poor people are like, this is kind of cool. You want to freak them out a little more? I used to work in marketing. I know how people like Kylie Jenner get paid for having the social media account followings that they have. Unfollow them. Unfollow them all. Now, Kylie Jenner, the kind of level of what kind of money is being made. She has 213 million followers as of press time, 1.2 million per sponsored Instagram post in 2019. And she was declared the world's youngest billionaire. Now, her message isn't to unfollow every celebrity you love, though. She explained it's okay to continue following the accounts that bring you joy, but called out Amazon as an example of companies and founders to forego. Well, kind of tough because for me, it's like I am quite a bit fond of Amazon because I do buy a lot of stuff on there. I got a box actually coming up in the house coming up a little bit later on tomorrow, so that's what I got. Now, whether or not Bologna's idea takes off as an organized act, it seems likely the idea to unfollow rich influencers may just become a trend as the eat the rich mentality gains more attention. Social media users were quick to subscribe to cancel culture. Even a lesser organized digital attack on celebrities involved in controversy. It happened to TikTok sweetheart Charli D'Amelio in November, when they took offense to a comment by D'Amelio about her follower count, and millions of unfollows resulted in just hours. Well, she's doing just fine. She's got her own cold foam at Dunkin' Donuts after her name, and it's selling like crazy. From what I've learned, people are going. I'm a pretty avid goer of Dunkin' Donuts myself, or Dunkin', excuse me, right? No Dunkin' Donuts, right? Dunkin'. So I go to that, and people are saying they're buying it. So, when I ask the employees, are people really into that cold foam? I guess they are. There you go. Now, as we go and transition over to influencers, one thing that's also being done by some of the larger corporate types of media is trying to go ahead and shut down or criticize influencer marketing. And most recently, there was a documentary that was done by HBO called Fake Famous that Entrepreneur Magazine talked about how it was done all wrong. And the way they describe it was all wrong. So it's a new film on influencer marketing through an ironically superficial lens. So here's what he got. Out of touch, basically, he's trying to say. So Jason Falls, he has a book that's coming out called Reframing Influencer Marketing to Ignite Your Brand. He mentioned that Nick Bilton's HBO documentary Fake Famous paints quite the definitive indictment of anyone calling themselves an influencer. Bilton and his team took a random person and bought her fake followers, likes and comments to see if brands would think she's influential. Fake Famous certainly exposes fraud and deception, but more so in Bilton's technique that his subjects resulting web celebrity status. The gist of the movie is Bilton, who has recently appeared on a podcast that he hosted, doesn't like that kids today want to grow up to be online influencers. He sets out the point to prove the job title is a hollow pit of lies perpetuated by shallow people with marginal talent but caviar dreams. Casting his experiment in Los Angeles and initially finds 3 victims for his ruse. 2 of them back out during the process. And then 1 deletes Bilton's bot followers and comments, opting to build his influence the organic way. And another one feels guilty when his friends question his bot followers and bails as well. One of them, by the name, was Dominic Druckmann. She goes on in, jumping from just over 1,100 Instagram followers to more than 250,000, thanks to Bilton's credit card and a lot of help creating modestly decent content for her feed. When brands start sending her free products and inviting her on influencer junkets, the film concludes that influencers are all fame-obsessed, unemployed wannabes. It falls just shy of indicating that they are the underbelly of society. Wow. It's pretty nasty they're going to do that. Again, when I'm looking at influencers on TikTok or Instagram, again, we're seeing that person in a picture, a collage of pictures, or in a short video, maybe once a day, maybe twice a day. And that's it. Or on a live stream. That's it. So there might be some people that are just consumed on that because, again, there is a little bit of this dopamine type nature on the internet where people are going to go in and get involved with somebody and just follow along. And the reason why is because the creators, they're able to go and put out live streams and then really go and make some extra money on content by having them engage and interact with their audience. The way to engage with audience now. Okay, it's not so much how it was where if you had a radio show, you had a call-in line and people were just going to call in, or texting they have now, or other places they can go. People are not engaging that way. The true engagement now is through live streams, which I don't do. I did do it on Periscope at one point for a little bit, but really not much. Now, I'm going to probably do something a little bit with that when Twitter Spaces come into play. Because if it's audio only, much like now the new thing, Clubhouse, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that is the engagement factor for influencers now. And it's funny where audio might be more important than video in that case, where the opportunity for people to just have the right voice can be an influencer, like yours truly, King of Podcasts, right? Which I'll take that one. Again, made for radio. I'll do that. Because I'm not some beautiful woman over here, that's got the right makeup, the right gloss, the right, mascara, has the great hair, has the great body, that is going to be appealing for camera. Not like I'm not trying to put myself down. I'm just being honest. Younger, prettier, good looking, handsome. That's what people want to go and see. They want to see pretty people. And it's funny where the pretty people that are going to watch, they're going to go and watch them over on a TikTok or Instagram or somewhere else or Snap or whatever they want, because that's what they want, or Twitch, whatever they want. It's just a different story altogether. So I like all that. Now, there is influencer fraud, and this Entrepreneur article does say that. And then we'll move along to Clubhouse and some other things that we're going to be talking about next. So in this story, without question, the writer adds, fraudulent behavior from influencers is a real and relevant problem for businesses. If an influencer's profile says they have 200,000 followers, but only 50,000 of them are real, the brand is at a disadvantage. People are more insidious. An offense is faked engagement. Having bot accounts load a post with likes and comments affects an influencer's engagement rate. The higher that number, the more of their alleged followers are taking real action when they post. So when someone with 100,000 followers and a 2.5% engagement rate reportedly activates 2,500 people at a time. It gets worse. The third level of Dante's Inferno of unethical behavior from influencers is the comment pod. This is where 20 or 30 more influencers collude and comment on each other's post for the sole purpose of making engagements look real and full of other influencers. In reality, none of them are going to be moved to try the product the influencer endorses or post about it themselves, unless you pay them to. Nicole Hampton, leader of the influencer practice at MWWPR, based in Los Angeles, said, quote, I think it's especially rampant with newer influencers. They want to become influencers and believe that in order to do so, all they need is a lot of followers and a high engagement rate. So that's the story of this particular movie that came out, Fake Famous, and what they were talking about. Now, there's much more to talk about in the story that I could bring up, and I'll leave it all for you to go and take a look at it for yourselves. You can go and read about it. I have that in the description here at broadcasterspodcast.com, or just look in the show notes. Wherever you can find the podcast, you'll be able to go and look for all the links to everything I'm going to talk about here on the show. You can look for that there. So there you go. So let's move along and talk about where to engage with your audience. Well, I've been hearing about this for over a month, and, I'm not on it because I don't have an iPhone. Most of my platforms that I need to use for everyday things, I have to go and use by way of Windows. Do I like that? No. And, I don't mind too much being an Android person either. Like, it just happens to be what I have to use. So Digiday puts a story about how brands are now in the Clubhouse app. The Clubhouse app, obviously, it's this one service that's all audio. Let's go and talk about it real quick and bring up what this is. Clubhouse right now is a hotbed of influencers. Every social network with big ambitions has their own take on influencers, and the audio app is no different. Clubhouse is grooming more than 40 of its most popular influencers or moderators, as they are known on Clubhouse for success. The influencer program opens the group up to tools, advice, and time with Clubhouse execs to improve the content they create to draw more people to the exclusive invite-only experience. So unlike other social networks, Clubhouse is audio-based. People can join different conversations on different topics. Think of it like being able to dip in and out of panel discussions from an app minus the sandbox moment from a sponsor. And therein lies the rub for marketers. Clubhouse is ad-free. While this hasn't outright deterred marketers from the app, it has made them think harder about what they should be doing on it. So far, this means working with the app's influencers. Not only is it safe insofar as advertisers get to control who does the talking in the room, it's also the easiest way to market somewhere that clearly isn't a place for hard sales yet. In the app, these moderators or influencers are put on a virtual stage and can control who speaks when and on what topic. And their conversations are then promoted on the app's main feed and touted to users via push alert. So they go into some of the marketers that are on here and what they've been doing. Without the boondoggles of curated content, profile pictures, and filtered images, Clubhouse and its users value transparency. And the word has been users been reporting others for promoting multi-level marketing businesses. Others have taken to Twitter to express similar complaints. And Twitter's going to have their own thing called Twitter Spaces, which is the place I'm looking for to kind of do things like that. But despite this initial use of influencers, Clubhouse is likely to remain brand light for a while. Like many new social platforms, ads and how marketers can leverage ads come last. The watch time right now is incredibly large because of people spending towards up to 8 hours on the app. And one of the people that hosted rooms for as long as 50 hours says because it's so fresh and so new, brands seemingly have no idea what to look for when it comes to Clubhouse, just as knows it's a significant avenue that they should capitalize on. So there we go. Engagement is the place. So for people to go ahead and do what they're doing right now, and that's the old thing I have with me, is because it's not always where you're going to engage with the audience. Because again, the engagement that I normally would have would be within my audio content. And I mean, the way I'd have to do it is like, okay, maybe I could do, if I had an audio forum that I would do live and I could just drop it when I want, that might be one thing. I mean, that could be something I could do. But then there's also the other part where, you know, I could go on the YouTube and do live videos there, I guess. But my thing is it worth the time? Because when I see certain influencers that decide to go on, that's just them spending some time to talk to fans. And I'm the kind of person that I just don't want to just sit there on a video screen and just, veg. I mean, for me, I feel compelled to continue to give content. I just don't want to just sit there and just, talk back to people that might just say something. I can't do that. I feel like I need to be doing something. And that's a real talent. If you have that much of a presence, that all you have to do is just say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go on here and just jump on and let people to go and talk to me or whatever. You can ask me questions, Q&A kind of stuff. And that's fine with them. I mean, I don't know. It's been kind of tough to wrap our head around on how people are able to go and do that, and how many people do like to go ahead and be involved and engaged. Now, there's some people that do better than others, obviously. Like there are some people that are TikTok influencers, or they go ahead and they're creators, and they might go and put something up, but they only might have maybe 50 to 100 people on a chat, but they're content with just talking to people in that chat at that time. Meanwhile, there's some others that might have 2,000 to 4,000. And they're on a regular basis. And they go on and spend a lot of time on. Like, okay, I got it. So I see that. Twitter has their thing, and then there's others. And for me, I just don't want to do it on video. I would much rather have the audio version, which I never got to use on Periscope because they had the audio version. I would have loved to have done that. But they never brought us that. But if Twitter Spaces is coming in and they'll give us an audio forum there, then that might be the place I'll start engaging on a little bit more. And just a little bit of follow-up on what I do on a regular basis, or if I just jump on because there's something else I want to bring up on my mind. But then again, what has been working for me is that if I have something to talk about, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it. Does that make sense? So for me, I'm always the one that I will continue to if you're going to spend time with me, I'm going to give you a reason to. Because I don't make myself such a big deal, and I'm such a sociable person to have so much to say. I'd rather just have people go ahead and go. But again, it's a matter of that you got to think about the amount of engagement that you get from your content that you already produce and you prepare, and it's done and ahead of time that people can go and access anytime they want on demand. But then when you're trying to do this live, then you're only going to get a very small percentage of what you get. Tom Leykis just always talk about that the phone callers that he would get to a show only represent about 1% of his entire audience. And that is the way you should think about it. Just saying. There's a couple other stories I want to bring up before we can wrap things up. Only about 10 minutes left before we can wrap up for the hour. A couple of things I wanted to bring up that I thought were very interesting. In music, the economics of music streaming and Music Business Worldwide talked about this. I thought this was important for the musicians out there because of what they're able to go and do and what they're able to make music out there. Same thing goes. So here's what the story is. Senior executives from Spotify, Apple, Amazon were grilled live on camera by British politicians in the final session of a UK parliamentary inquiry into the economics of music streaming. In recent weeks, the UK arms of the major record companies Universal Music UK, Sony Music UK, and Warner Music UK have filed written submissions with this parliamentary committee, setting out their views on a number of streaming's most fiercely debated talking points. And here is what they learned. There was in three parts. First was user-centric licensing. The Parliament Committee asked the majors, can you clarify whether your company support user-centric payment systems, and if not, what alternative payment systems were being alluded to? And in the story, just to take just the bullet points, Universal says, we welcome any proposal that maximizes fairness and transparency and supports market growth. Sony said it's extremely important to understand that a shift in reporting methodology would not increase the amount of money artists are paid in the aggregate. Warner Music says a user-centric model would not change the overall royalty pool, and our analysis suggests that any changes in the allocation of payments to artists would not be significant. Second is major label shareholdings in Spotify. Universal Music, the question was who are concerned that the various shareholding arrangements between Spotify, your companies, and your parent companies might lead to anti-competitive influences when it comes to licensing, playlisting, etc. Universal says, as we have said previously, and consistent with our approach to artists' compensation, if we should sell those shares in the future, where some of these companies own shares of Spotify, that's part of what they were doing, they have voluntarily committed to share proceeds with the artists. Sony Music would say we have to date shared more than $250 million in the proceeds of our sale of Spotify shares directly with artists and distributed labels, disregarding whether their accounts may be recouped or recouped. Warner Music said WMG doesn't currently have an equity stake in Spotify, nor does Spotify have an equity stake in WMG. There's no conflict of interest or anti-competitive influence. Then the area of streaming as a sale versus a rental. And the committee asked the labels to explain precisely why streaming should be classified as making available, i.e. covered making the available right. Getting at whether a stream should count as a sale or a rental. The distinction here is important. The license for a sale, as the stream is currently defined in the UK, is negotiated directly between the DSPs and the labels. And then defining a stream as a rental will be a stream more akin to a broadcast, for example, music played on the radio or TV. Universal Music would reply, the reason for introducing the exclusive making available right at the international level in the first place was to ensure that rights holders can authorize online uses that have the same commercial effect as the distribution of copies in the offline world. Sony Music replied, if streaming was treated as broadcast and artists received direct and material share of the fees payable, the balance payable to the label would not be sufficient to maintain investment in new signing, A&R, and marketing. And Warner Music would say, because of its interactive nature, streaming clearly falls within the definition of making the available right. And that's what they said about that. So a couple of things we brought up about what they're going to be doing with that. And I thought it was kind of interesting about that. It is important that more money comes in for the artists for what they're able to do, especially when they don't have live concerts or merchandise they can sell as much as they normally would. But then again, this is where you can't just go right after the streamers. Okay, there are still changes that need to be made when it comes to radio. And if you need to go and start attacking local radio stations for royalties, then have at it. Because online does quite a bit of its own online radio streams, and the streaming companies for music, they are doing their part and paying their part in royalties. Maybe that's not enough, but again, what is never enough for the musicians? Let's be honest. And then really it's a matter of the cut that the regular labels will go ahead and get for themselves and the publishers. Another story I want to bring up here is from Neiman Lab. I haven't talked about journalism in a while, but this is an interesting story. Getting back to engagement. News organizations that want journalists to engage with their audience may be setting them up for abuse. It's amazing. I'm going to get through all my subjects today here on the show. Jacob Nelson writes this story and says, quote, "They're not reaching out to these people with the story ideas. They're just telling them you suck and you're ugly and you're biased and your hair sucks." So the story is news organizations are trying to do a better job connecting with their audiences in hopes of overcoming the profession's credibility problems and ensuring its long-term survival. So they're trying to go ahead and retcon and try to do a little damage control after what's happened, especially during this election season. Let's just say that. Now, to do this, a number of newsrooms for years have embraced what's called audience engagement. The efforts to increase the communication between journalists and the people they hope to reach. So, taking many forms and varying from online, for example, the use of social media to interact with readers about a story after it's been published, to offline, for example, meetings between journalists and community members to discuss a story currently being produced. Engagement shows audiences that journalists are real people with the training and skills necessary to provide accurate information that is trustworthy. Also offering people an opportunity to contribute their ideas about how their communities could be covered, allowing news consumers a larger role in shaping their own stories. But there are obstacles they're talking about. They also say this outcome is important for communities of color, long ignored and misrepresented by newsrooms that have historically comprised mostly white middle-class editors and reporters. So there's a new book that this writer does, Jacob Nelson. He wrote a book called Imagine Audiences, How Journalists Perceive and Pursue the Public. And in his research, he interviewed journalists at the Chicago Tribune, many of whom described the newspaper's audience as massive and broad, spoke about listening to that audience via emails and social media like Facebook and Twitter. The interactions were typically not meaningful, constructive conversations. More often, they were belligerent, angry, and even threatening. One journalist, under anonymity, said they're not reaching out to these people, these story ideas. Again, we just told that story. And the audience feedback is increasingly widespread and indicative of what journalism studies scholar Thorsten Quandt calls dark participation, defined as the evil flip side of citizen engagement, and typically focused at more female journalists than their male counterparts. And there's a lack of institutional guidance he talked about. Journalists' aggravation in these situations are compounded by the fact that their bosses don't give much in the way of instructions on how best to deal with them. One Tribune columnist explained the newspaper's guidance is informal, often coming after the fact. If I get a really crappy email, I'll send a smart-ass response of some sort, that columnist told me. And I got an email one time from my editor saying, please don't pick fights with the reader. The lack of guidance when it comes to audience engagement at large news outlets with huge audiences has begun to cause public disagreements between journalists and their editors. So we had the story from last January. This is not this one, but January 2020, when the Washington Post suspended reporter Felicia Sonmez for tweeting about the allegations of sexual assault against Kobe Bryant just hours after he died. Which, that was a deserved thing, right? New York Times media columnist Ben Smith, who was formerly the editor-in-chief at BuzzFeed, says some news outlets are more encouraging than others when it comes to journalists communicating with their audiences via social media platforms like Twitter. But he also adds, caught, quote, in the uncomfortable middle are the defining American news brands, where managers alternate between sending irritated emails and biting their tongues, and journalists marvel and complain at the question of who gets away with what on Twitter and who gets in trouble. And then Emily Bell, the director of the Toe Center for Digital Journalism, at Columbia University, Gaza tongue twister, mentioned that social media policies for journalists tend to be hard to find, out of date, and inadequate, concluding that, quote, reporters want more rather than less guidance on how to work with social platforms. And this writer talks about time for clarity. So in the story, they're talking about that the dark participation, really the abuse that journalists face if they are to continue encouraging the journalists to pursue more engagement with the readers is going to increase. And news organizations could get more explicit when it comes to describing how journalists should engage with their audiences, how they should not, and most importantly, what the expected outcomes of the engagement is or are, right? The world's biggest brands of news may find an approach to what is said community-centered approach to engage journalism that emphasizes deliberate in-person discussions between journalists and citizens would be helpful. But again, it's not feasible. If the outlets decided to embrace the approach regardless, they would likely need to reevaluate how they think of their audiences. That might lead to outlets moving away from a mass media approach of journalism to one focused on earning the trust and loyalty of smaller niched audiences. As newsrooms continue the difficult work of deciding how to best restore the public's trust in their reporting, they would do well to consider not just the opportunities that audience engagement presents, but its risks and challenges as well. Well, there's a reason for some of this to have happened. Let's just say that. There's a long-standing point of why clickbait, rage bait, and creating content that will stir up the emotions of every given reader out there or viewer or content consumer, if you're watching it or listening to it online, they're upset because accuracy in media, that's not there. Again, I just heard earlier about an Arizona TV reporter that had been there in the market in Phoenix, Arizona for 20 years, leaving the field, ashamed of the profession. Now, for me, I've really got myself away from news altogether. I did say at the start of the year, I was keeping a New Year's resolution, and I've kept it, staying away from news and politics altogether. It's just toxic. It's hard enough to find information that you really can believe and be credible about, because if I had to go ahead and continue to go ahead and read through story after story of the same article to make sure I get all the points that are taken there, it would be impossible. And to have to go through news aggregators to get that information as well in the same vein, it's just impossible. And I felt much more relieved and less stress by not watching it. Staying away from news and politics. Right now, when it comes to DC politics, when I look at the ratings, they've gone back to normal levels as they were before the election season, right? And so there's that. Otherwise, I think people are going to be less interested in news anyway. But the only reason that people will stay around to watch news is going to be probably predominantly older audience or those that are just really just consumed by the rage bait. They just can't help themselves. They're going to get outraged by every little thing that happens. And when that happens, they're just going to say, oh, okay. And I know what the stories are that are going to create the rage bait because I hear about them on social media. You can't avoid it. Somebody's going to comment about it. I heard somebody that I know very well that was outraged about the Dr. Seuss books, not in the point of the books being taken down, about why people cared about it, other than being taken down for what reason. Then Texas and Mississippi opening up for the pandemic, opening up businesses once again, going 100% open. There's that story that came out and everybody's all upset about and all worked up about. And then the other one was, the Taylor Swift stuff from earlier this week and things like that. I'm like, okay. And again, I see it from the outside. I'm not even fencing anymore. I've gotten off the fence. I'm just not watching. I'm just not getting involved in it. There's just so many other things that I'm interested in. Like, I can find news about anything that is not news, right? There's that. And at least we have that. But when it comes to regular news, it doesn't matter to me now. The journalism is dead. It's a dying breed, and for those that are doing that right now, it's a propaganda thing. And it's not said to be that it's political propaganda. A lot of it is. Okay, there's a political motive by the news and how it's being reported. But then again, it's also a profit motive. Politics and profit are the two reasons how news is being presented today, even on the local level. Because the networks the companies that own some of these said stations, they're going to also take this national perspective and inject it into the local programming, into the local newsrooms, because the local newsrooms have less staff to work off of. So they have to rely on much more larger scale media content. And that's not good. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening to the program as you catch the show as you always do, each and every Thursday night going into Friday. Back with another episode next week of the Broadcasters Podcast. And I'm not ready to go ahead and start recording any new interviews right now. I'm going to hold off on it because I'm trying to figure out what's the next era of what I want to talk about next. And I think I want to wait until things start to get reopened when I hear more about LA and New York opening back up and the reopening of media altogether. I'm going to want to learn about that next, but it's not time for that yet. Maybe towards the summer when things start to slow down a little bit, that's probably the right time to do it. But I'm going to wait a couple months before I start getting back to interviews once again. So we'll keep doing content like this. I think it's been good and I enjoy it, and I hope you do too. And please do reach out to me if you enjoy this. Hit me up on all my social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at King of Podcasts. And, of course, find the show right here, broadcasterspodcast.com. Email is kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com. Also, look for me on YouTube, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. All of this is at broadcasterspodcast.com. You can find it all there. So go and get engaged, be a part of it. And remember that until next week, content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.